Welcome coaches to this Intercultural Coaching Masterclass. The second one. We did one last year, which was kind of the start and a pilot, and it was successful. So we decided to create another one. Last year, I was kind of by myself with 2 or 3 guest speakers. And since then, I've teamed up with Mick. And so I'm very happy that we doubled in size. Let's see where we are next year. So the intercultural coaching community is a combination of the NOBCO, which is a Dutch affiliate of the EMCC, and the global EMCC. And we brought these communities together for purpose because we like to have an international community for this intercultural, for these intercultural coaching webinars. And the ICC, so the Intercultural Coaching Community, is rooted in the growing sense that coaching is a social movement, as well as a community of practice. And with this masterclass, we aim for a positive impact on global inequality. So we are on a mission, and you know, the coaching community is growing, and we are across the globe. And I think it's important for us to raise or to bring awareness to this issue of cultural inequality. Yeah, so during last year's webinar, oh yes, thanks Arvid. So here you can see the menti.com, and it says in Dutch, gebruik de code, which means use the code 43207206. So if you go to menti.com and you press that code, you can best do that via your mobile phone. You can also join our conversation there. And I already see hearts moving, which is great. So we will post some questions on the Menti, which is going to be helpful also later during the webinar. So yeah, it will be great to see where everyone's located. So we'll leave this one on, and then we're going to see how intercultural we are today. So my name is Rick Skyper. I work as an executive coach and do that internationally. And so intercultural coaching is dear to my heart, professionally, but also personally, because I'm part of an intercultural family with 5 different cultures merging, which is lovely and challenging at times, like I guess in every family. But so this topic of intercultural coaching is important to me. And I'm also curious to know from our guest speaker today, Jennifer Paler. We are very pleased that she's joining us today. And also for my partner in crime, Mick, to know, you know, how come this topic of intercultural coaching is important to you. And meanwhile, we can see some dots on and off the map. I think that's interesting. Someone's in the middle of the ocean. But we already see that most of us, I think, are located in Europe. So I already said last year we had the first masterclass, and what came out of that was when we as coaches coach interculturally, it's helpful to have some humility, to know yourself, to stay curious, maybe just a little longer, and to realize, to know what binds us as humanity. So that came out of last year's masterclass, and I'm really curious to know what will come out of today's conversation. And like I said, I'm joined today by lots of coaches like you yourself, but I'd like to take a moment to introduce 2 wonderful people and coaches. So Jennifer Paler, our guest speaker for today, is an executive coach, a speaker, and a board member. But most of all, she is a visionary, bold, and servant leader in the landscape of organizational transformation, and currently working in Capgemini, leading learning and development. And so we're so honored and pleased to have you with us, Jennifer, today. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and experience with us. And like I said, I'm not alone here. Mick Levan and I have been creating this masterclass together. So Mick is a coach, a team coach in the realm of agility, originally from Ireland, currently in Czech Republic, and has lived over over 6 countries, I believe. So Jennifer, I'd like to start with you. How come you feel this topic of intercultural coaching is important?
You hit on it a little bit in the beginning around this being a social movement. I think that, to me, is the crux. There's no way to change anything by yourself. Something as big as what we're talking about, social fabrics and constructs and beliefs, and helping people just become unstuck. It takes all of us. So I am a huge fan of anything that's moving. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people think about radical candor or radical leadership as a negative thing. I think it is a strength. And I think more of us coaches and organizations have to think about, what movements are we really a part of? So that's why it's really important for me, because it takes all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. And how about you, Mick? How come this is important to you?
Yeah, so I've been working, as you said, over 8 countries, lived and worked in 8 countries. I've traveled around the world, and I've worked for multinationals quite a lot, and small companies in those local environments as well. So kind of working with international teams and coaching those teams, especially in kind of technical environments and that, you tend to come up with some viewpoints that really don't kind of, sit with your own sometimes. You can have a little bit of, a step back and wonder, like, what is it I'm missing here? Why don't we quite align in our values and that? So I found that working in my own language, but with people in other countries, it was sometimes difficult, to connect. So sometimes I had to take a step back, figure out what is it that I'm missing here, or what do I need to change? Because maybe there's something that I don't get. So understanding how those cultures come together was always an important thing to me. And I think it's important that we as coaches kind of realize that in ourselves, that we need to kind of adapt to the environments we're in, and maybe challenge people as well, though, within those environments too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so it's one of the factors that play a role in working as a coach interculturally or internationally. And looking at the mentee, what words come to mind when thinking about intercultural coaching? This is what you filled out. Diversity stands out, I guess. Values, inclusion, respect. Yeah.
Wow, it's moving quite rapidly there, isn't it? Curiosity is now coming up in language.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, connection.
So it seems that kind of diversity, curiosity, respect are there staying for most of this. So those are things that we probably experience as we move through intercultural coaching.
Understanding, yeah. Acceptance. Great.
I love that connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the understanding.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful to see it change. Mm-hmm. Non-judgmental, I see small core values. Yeah, so today we're meeting around sitting with another's values. And I think, I don't know about you, but I work with values as a coach, using it in conversations that I have with my coachees. And we chose this topic for a reason. And Mick, are you ready to share a little bit about?
Yeah. Sure. Working, in an international environment, I was actually struck one day. I worked with IBM, as Jennifer did for some time, and I was running a masterclass one day. It was a workshop, rather. It was an LGBT plus awareness workshop, and in the run up to the workshop, working internally, the people I coached, I'd pass them in the corridor, and I was challenged one day by a person in the office who asked me, "Why is it you're running that workshop? Why are you not running workshops for women or minority groups, religious ethnic groups? Why are you doing that one instead?" And I was quite taken aback that I was being challenged on this, because I was doing something good, right? I was doing an awareness workshop. I was doing an inclusive workshop. So why was I being challenged on not doing something? Why was I being exclusionary? It kind of took me aback straight away. It's like, what do I answer to that? And I mumbled something, don't even know what it was anymore. But afterwards, I wondered to myself, like, what was it that happened in that moment? And I realized that I felt my values were being challenged, because I was inclusionary, but I was being challenged on being exclusionary. So in that moment, my values were challenged. And I thought, what is it I need to do so that I don't have, so that I can give a better reaction? Maybe my better reaction would have been, oh, okay, so what is it you'd like to see maybe in a workshop about, kind of working with minority groups in a country like Czech Republic, which is it's not that there are not that many minority groups, but what would a workshop like that mean for you? How would we go about that? Can we maybe cooperate? Instead, I had to fumble something because I was triggered already. So I thought, how can we make that better? How can we give ourselves that space to sit, think a moment, and come back with a response that isn't challenging our values? And I think we're seeing it more and more every day as we sit with our coachees. And we've seen, lots of stuff in the media, lots of stuff on social media. And sometimes people are now bringing different value systems to us. But how do we, as coaches, work with our coachees without imposing our own value set onto them, but be comfortable sitting with them as we go as well? Rix, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks. Thank Mick for introducing that. And, values, I think what you said, go to the heart of self-identity, right? We identify with them, and they are a source for inspiration, motivation. And so I guess many of us use values in coaching sessions, but they're also, they're, of course, values are the foundation for cultures. Right. So when we look at different cultures and we look at cultural dimensions, those are based on different values. So when we coach across cultures, those different values from those cultural narratives enter our coaching conversation. So as intercultural coach, how do you deal with that efficiently? And how can you build on that? Those maybe taking out the nudges from those different cultures and using it. So I think before we go to the breakout, Arvid, I think we're gonna talk a little bit more about how values and cultures plays a role in setting up global coaching programs like Jennifer created for IBM. Yeah. So I think Mick is ready to ask you some questions, Jennifer.
Yes. I love it. It's getting juicy. This is
Mick,
a nice conversation.
Mick, you're on mute. Mick, you're on mute.
Mick. I'm coming off mute. I was so witty there a moment ago. You missed it. So Jennifer, yeah, we have a couple of questions for you maybe before we go to the breakout rooms. And the first one of those is, having worked in large corporations, as you've done, as many of us have done, with such diverse workforces, were there times that you found your values in conflict with some of your colleagues? And how did you deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this question, because when you're trying to create a movement of coaching in a large corporation like IBM that has about 300,000 employees, and I think it was 171 countries, Mick? I think that's how many countries we were in.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I met Mick there. So everything, it was worth it because I got to meet him, and look how we've come full circle. We sat down in the coaching community and said, what is the one thing we can do that will align with just about every culture, every country, every job role, every type of person in IBM? And we really, really thought about what we should be doing to build this coaching movement. And so we sat down and I said, all of us have one thing in common, and that's being a human being. Now, of course, IBM had Watson and, AI and supercomputers and RPAs, robotic process automation. But at the core of it all, we're all human. And what do all humans really care about? What's the shared purpose that we can really hold on to set the fire to this movement? And so when you think about IBMers, or you think about humans for the most part, humans want to touch lives. Coaches want to touch lives. And when that resonates with everybody, regardless of where you're from. So yes, there were some conflicts, Mick, around, but Jennifer, people would tell me things like, well, India is not going to be able to do this. They're not, thinking about, or China will not be able to do this. Maybe you want to pilot in the US first because, US are more people. And I was like, really? So I'm an engineer by trade. So I'm like, I think I hear an experiment, because I do believe my value is human beings are creative. They're whole. All of the coaches know here, we look at human beings as being whole. Everybody's unique, but there is a certain humanness, like a not human doing, but there's a certain quality that all of us have for the most part. We get up every day and most of us have a desire to be successful at whatever that means for each of us. So I want to hang my hat on that. I believe that human beings in India, in China, in Brazil, in Poland, I think they all would love to touch lives, and especially if they're in the coaching domain. And so that's what we really hung our premise on. And our theme was about touching lives. And we didn't have to go through the typical coaching operation of, we need to define coaching, we need to sell coaching, we need to show the ROI on coaching, oh, we need to get a pilot for this program. It was literally around, how do we inspire people to touch lives? And so it was a conflict, because I really believe that human beings want to do that. And I don't like to be in abstraction when it comes to the human experience. We have to really get down on the individual level. And so that was a conflict, but we got involved and we started, I think it was 4 of us. We went to 25, we went to 50. By the time I left IBM in November 2020, we were up to like 55, 75,000 that had gone through the IBM Blue Core coaching journey. We call it like a rites of passage. And you literally became a member of a powerful community of coaches that's entire goal was to touch human lives. And it didn't matter where you were. It didn't matter if you were in India. Some of our best coaches were out of India. One of the best coaches I know right now is in Russia. Some of the worst coaches were in the United States. So all of these stereotypes that we carry and these values, we have to stand for. And I was standing for human beings. And that's what I really value in a world. And yes, I'm a huge fan of AI in coaching, but there's a place for where that serves. And we'll probably get into that later. But those are some other values, that coaches say, well, why do we want AI or robots in coaching? So we'll talk about that later.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I was lucky enough to actually go through the Blue Core coaching program while in IBM as well. So it was a great program to actually be with. And I was looking to go further as well, but like yourself, I left IBM too before that happened. So great. I had another question for you before the breakout rooms, which is, you spoke about like going to those different countries and your ideas and that. Were there any kind of things you had to think about before going to those countries, like before going to India or China or Brazil? Were there specific things you needed to think of culturally or in value systems?
Of course, yes. I always had friends, and friends in each country, somebody that you can trust that could tell you things that are not politically correct. The challenges that people experience, the human experience, because sometimes in a corporation, people don't want to wear their emotions on their sleeves. And I was interested in, what does agency look like in each country? Because as a coach and as building that coaching community, you'll start to see where people lose agency and who has it. And I needed friends in that country to translate the agency in the individual countries. And I'll give you an example. One time, my leader, general manager, she says, Jennifer, I want you to go to Poland. And she wants me to go on an assignment to Poland and to Hungary. And I had never been to Poland and Hungary. I'd always been to Asia, Europe, Eastern Europe. So I've never, Central Europe. I've never been to Eastern Europe at that time. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? She says, I want you to go spread the light. I'm a Christian. And I was like, she can't be talking about, Christianity. And, she's talking about, I said, what do you mean? She said, you'll see when you get there. And I want you to do it like you do in coaching. So this was a client-facing environment where we had big companies like Rio Tinto, earth-moving companies, mining diamonds and things like that. And I said, okay. So Mick, I went there and I said, spread the light. And so I got there. And one of the things that I quickly observed, if any of you are from Poland or Hungary, let's connect on LinkedIn, because I have a lot of friends there and I'm a huge fan. I love Poland and Hungary now. But when I first went there, I was really curious and I noticed a mindset. It was a mindset of, not being hopeful or imagining the possibilities. And I'm, a positive person. I think if I get up every day, if I'm blessed to wake up every day, I think I can, make something of my day. But it was this gloom. And it was a belief that I can't go any further. I am what I am. So that was really like bothering me, because I couldn't grasp how, if we're living and we're human, how can we not show up? How can we lose agency to a point where we just want to give up in life? And it was 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. And so that was real. I was really in conflict. So I reached out to my friends and we had some deep conversations. And some people in the classes, in the circles, they kind of blew up and said, I hate humans. I hate people. I really just want to come to work and get money and just pay my bills. Not everyone, but by the time I left, people really were able to stand up and have their agency back and have some hope for the future. And so I understood what she meant. How do we as coaches still be compassionate and help bring people along? Because people have gone through so many things. It was post-communism. I have never been in communism. So how can I dare tell someone you should feel and you should be like me? I can't. You can't tell people. They have to come to their terms. And so being with them, sitting with them, literally sitting in their country, in their house, in their company, understanding how they're thinking and working it through together. We're still friends to this day.
Cool. I think there's been a sea change in attitudes over the last few years as well. So I think it's a lot more positive in Hungary, Poland, and other countries like that. There was a question in the chat there, Jennifer, about your definition of the word agency. Some people were confused on that.
Yeah, agency is like when you have the power to literally step back and just pause and think about your values. Pause and think about what you believe, and pause and think about why you are showing up the way you're showing up. And sometimes we get so overwhelmed with life, we get stuck, we get distracted, and we lose that. And we never sit back. And like Mick said, when he was confronted with that situation, he had to step back and think about what's happening. You know, why is this happening? When we just go through life and we don't do that, and we just go through the motion, sometimes we're just robotic. We have lost our sense of self, our identity, the power that moves us individually. And in your coaching sessions, you know, our clients will say, I don't know what to do. It shows up like that. I don't know what decision to make. I'm stuck. You know, I'm torn in between. They'll say things like that. There's a sign that they may be losing their sense of agency, or they have lost it, but you can get it restored. So that's what it means. How often do we let our clients sit there in their values and really think about the way they're thinking?
And how do we affect change, in fact, from our perspective as well? So I saw a comment in the chat there that I'd not say things have been improving in Hungary and Poland from the perspective of inclusion, for example. Those things will hopefully come. Those things we can affect. If we have agency, we can affect those things, hopefully, in parts of the world where we see that is a problem. Jennifer, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing those answers. They were wonderful. I think we're going to move to a breakout room now, are we? So we are going to send people in small groups. I'm not sure how many people we have on at the moment, but it's quite a substantial number, 130, I think, participants it is. We're going to send you to breakout rooms for 10 minutes, where you're going to, we have 3 questions for you to discuss amongst yourselves and bring back to us after the breakout room. The questions are, what are your 3 most important values? You'll be able to find these on Menti as well. So anyone who wants to look at them on Menti, it will be on your phone. The second question is, share one short story where this comes to life. So your values, how maybe an issue you had, or something that affected how you see your values. And the third question is, how do you incorporate the coachee's values in your coaching session? So how do you maybe sit with the coachee if your values don't align? So you'll have 10 minutes. Arvid will send you all randomly, I presume, to breakout rooms. And we will see you back in 10 minutes here in the main room.
Have fun. Hope you had a nice conversation. Good. Glad. See some thumbs up. And we would love to know, especially some of the suggestions maybe of how to incorporate the coachee's values into coaching conversations. So if you can leave a comment in the chat box, that would be great. So we'd love to hear some ideas about the third question. How do you incorporate the coachee's values in your coaching sessions? And oh, we didn't have enough time. Yeah, sorry. Always the problem. It was way too short. Yeah, sorry.
Perhaps we could just ask for your feedback in the chat box, and then we'll come back to those in a few moments. We're running just a little bit behind time, so we want to come back to those things as we go through it.
Not enough time. It was too short. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So was there someone who did discuss this question around how to incorporate the values of the coachee in your coaching conversation, or was it all too short? Or maybe it's something that you didn't discuss in this conversation, but that comes to mind. I see someone saying, I usually start with a value clarification process and then align the coaching goal with the top 5 values. Yeah. Pressuring them a little bit to make some decisions, probably setting priorities. Yeah.
I like there's one looking at them as drivers of behavior when they might, it's going very fast, when they might be being held on to too tightly, when values help, and when they might get in the way. So that's an interesting one. Creating the coaching agreement involves values. Okay.
Yeah, using it for decision making.
Naming things as they emerge, agreeing at the beginning how we'd like to hold the tensions that may arrive in our space. That's probably a very useful one. What is it that comes into the room? What tension arises during the session?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or listen between the lines, right? Someone says, I often notice values in an initial conversation. Just listening to stories, and you can kind of read between the lines and hear the values. Great. So sorry we didn't give you enough time. And we'll promise to do better next time. It's always hard to have a good conversation in short time. I realize that. But we'll have another breakout session, and hopefully then you'll have more time to explore. And I'd like to go to what I call the difference between value orientation and value actualization. So there is a difference between what we aspire, what our ideals are, what we envision, what seems to be important for us. And then there is the realization of actualizing that, of actually putting that into our moment to moment and into our actually behavior, into our decisions. And there can be a discrepancy, right? We love that to be congruent, because then that's like a peak experience when you fully live your values. And sometimes we find ourselves, you know, in that there is a difference. And I recently was coaching a leader, and she, in my opinion, was a bit black and white. She was pretty judgmental about what her team needed. And so, one of my values is connection. So I see myself as a person who needs connection, connection is important to me, to myself and to others. But I was judging her. I was seeing her in a certain light. And with that, I was not connecting to her. So although it is, you know, part of my values is how I see myself, what I find ideal, in the moment-to-moment coaching conversation, it wasn't actually putting that into practice. So I think then it's helpful to do the work as a coach. So I needed to catch myself, to become mindful, and to kind of quiet my ego. I had a conversation actually with a colleague, and she said to me, you know, just stay curious, just a little longer, right? So that helped me to ask another question, to go back into a conversation with her and to be more curious. And then the conversation changes. Right, so what do we do as coaches when we find ourselves maybe stuck, or we are bothered by our own bias? Because, you know, we're human, so that can happen. And what resources do we have that can help us to self-regulate? I think, Arvid, there is a question in the Menti around, you know, what do we do when there is a difficulty? So just maybe from your gut, or maybe from your experience, what do you do when you find it difficult to sit with another's values? Please feel free to leave us a note there, or a vote, I should say, and then we see what shows up. So there is this sense of self-regulation, practice, for example, mindfulness or stillness or other. Going out for a walk helps me. Practice humility and staying curious just a little bit longer. Maybe connect with a peer coach or your coach or supervisor or mentor and ask feedback and suggestions. Maybe it's just helpful for you to say no to certain coaching assignments, or there's something else that you do to quiet your ego or to regulate yourself. And I see the practicing humility, staying curious just a little bit longer. Yeah, auto-compassion. See someone in the chat box. So yeah, so if there's other, you can leave that in the chat box. Okay, so we like to send you off again in a breakout. And this time, let's take 15 minutes. So 5 minutes longer.
Do we have the questions for the breakout here? Yes, we do. Okay. So again, these will be on Menti. So if you have Menti open, you'll be able to take them with you to the breakout rooms. The questions we're asking is, what strategies could you employ so that you, as a coach, are not triggered negatively by your coachee expressing values that you do not share? Question 2 is, how do you as a coach ensure that you avoid bringing bias into the session? And do we as coaches have a responsibility to combat misinformation and bias? And what do you do yourself to quiet your ego? Maybe focus on only one of the questions, choose that in your group so that you have time to explore any one of them, and then come back with, if you get an opportunity for 2, that's fine as well. I think we can send you all off to the breakout rooms now. Arvid, please do the magic.
Hello, welcome back. I hope you had a great conversation. We gave you 5 more minutes and only 1 question. So hopefully you had some time to exchange some ideas, and we are curious to hear some insights from the breakout. So let's wait a little bit so everyone's back. And we're just curious to know, what insights emerged from your conversation. What's helpful to quiet your ego. And if you want to share something, we'd love for you to share what came out of that conversation. Just raise your hand. You can do that by pressing the reaction button on the right lower part of your screen. You can raise your hand, and then we'll unmute you, and we'd love to hear what you have to share.
Sorry, Rick, everybody's able to unmute themselves, but please use the raise hand to keep it a bit coordinated.
So we're looking forward to hearing anything you'd like to share with us. I see a few familiar faces as well, so I don't want to call out names. So it'd be better if people volunteered by themselves. We have a couple of volunteers. We have Jörn up in the corner here, Kosterman.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, just a short one. It's actually, I think, the 4th question about the ego thing. How do I quiet my ego? And we were actually a little bit surprised about this question, because should it not be that you should not quiet your ego, because it's always there and it should actually participate in the conversation with your client?
Yeah. So so maybe it's about having a conversation then with your ego, to say what it has to say, right? To be curious about that. Yeah. The quiet ego, there's actually a whole concept and theory behind that. And someone who did a lot of research around how to support what we call the transformative self. And one of the aspects is to quiet your ego. So to at least know, you know, what are the judgments that you hold, the biases you have. Oh, thank you, Arvid. So there's a Professor Heidi Wymant in Northern Arizona. And so she says, when we look at the transformative self, and as coaches, of course, we are in the business of transformation, helping to transform our clients. But, you know, we also need to transform ourselves, of course. And then she has a definition of the quiet ego, which is around ego detachment, inclusive and interdependent identification, and compassion, perspective taking, and of course, the growth mindset. So if you're curious about that, then please look that up. Someone else, Anna S. Carpenter, raise her hand.
So in our group, we had, I think it's question number 4, the one about the biases or the mistruth. And the idea here was how much is that bias stopping the person to evolve? Or is it really the core of the session? So if it's something that we consider our own judgment that it is a bias, but it is not stopping the person, then we have to pass it by because it doesn't influence the process. And then on the other hand, okay, if it does influence, then definitely challenge the person on that belief, because if that belief is not allowing the person to move on, then yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. I guess from that perspective, is it the coachee we're challenging, or ourselves as a coach we're challenging with the bias? If we come up with find a bias in ourselves, is that something we need to challenge in ourselves afterwards, maybe in supervision?
This of the bias has come up in our conversation, and I think that it was brought up the difference between facts and opinions. And bias means that you are, okay, say that you or the client are biased, or what are the facts? Let's establish that. Is it possible to establish the facts? Because across cultures, it was brought an example that there can be misunderstanding due to, for example, language or culture. And in our conversation, one of the others brought up the example that the word open, the house is open, so this group is open, was by almost everyone interpreted like everyone can come in, but someone interpreted culturally in another way, that then people can go out. What does it mean open? We all would have thought open means that we are welcome. But for that person said, but then open means that people can go away and escape and don't answer and neglect the people. See what I mean? That was a good example about assessing the facts.
Is that maybe an opportunity to be curious about?
Exactly. That was this person said that then was solved by him by bringing everyone together and asking this person that was objecting, what is the problem and what is it that bothers you? And so it came out that the word open was interpreted completely the other way that is normally for us interpreted. Open means you can come in, and for this other person meant, oh, everyone can go away and escape the connection. No.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
That was a great example, not of mine, but it came up.
Thank you for sharing that. Pierre?
Yes, I was a bit amused by the fact that some people would like have a wish or fantasy not to being triggered. It's a very good thing of being triggered. It means we are alive. We are living beings. So it just means that something in my memory has been caught up by something happening in the environment, my coachee, whatever. And it just means I need to listen to my basic human needs. So the best way for me to make sure that this parallel process that is in place, I'm aware of it. So I'm using that as a message for myself. What is my basic human need that has not been completely nourished? And then what can I do? Accept it. So the way I would like to react is already how to accept it, because it's a good way. It's not probably the best way for my coachee, but and what can I do from there? Can I put on the pause button and say what I would like to do a bit different instead? It's still in line with my basic need, and that would be better for the relationship with my coachee. Mm. So listen to my body, listen to what it means to me, and being completely in line to what it means to be a living being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To see it as input signals.
Exactly.
Have a conversation with that.
Feelings are just messengers. We have to listen to them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that insight, Pierre. Jennifer, anything coming to mind around these responses from the breakouts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, the more I hear the comments and look at the messages, I start to think about transparency and trust. And as a coach, it's a lot of work that we have to do, on us. Sometimes we're trained, I was trained, that all of the work is on the coachee for the most part. But I think there is a lot of work that's on the coach as well that we need to do. And it's a question of how transparent can I really be in the spirit of building trust? Can I share that I have a bias? Can I share that I'm conflicted right now? Can I share how this is throwing me off? So how much transparency is allowed in any moment without eroding trust? Or that may help to build the trust with the coachee. So I always think about that. And I'm hearing some of the comments, and it reminded me of how transparent can we really be?
Thank you. That's really beautiful summary, I think, from the chat and from what emerges from these conversations. Anyone else willing to share an insight? Please feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself and share. We'd like to tap into the collective wisdom of this great intercultural group of coaches together.
So you can unmute yourself if you want.
Silence.
So will I start calling names out? I saw somebody earlier, very used to being on the camera, just released a documentary. Would that person like to join us?
But in the meantime, just about biases and how to work with biases. It's for me, what works is relying really on observation instead of jumping to conclusions or assumptions, and let it unfold, actually. So without taking, sides or deciding that a person is this or that. Just observe.
Yeah. Brilliant. Observe, using your senses, going to the facts. Yeah. Thank you. Sue, thank you, Dora. Sue, you raised your hand.
Thank you. And I agree with Dora. I think for me, there's something about observation. And actually, if I am triggered, that could be really helpful to put into the conversation, because it could be very relevant to what the coachee is working on. So there are times when I have we're working with a coachee and there is a topic And what's going on for me is absolutely directly relevant to this topic. And I think by being able to bring some of how I am experiencing them in the moment can really get to the heart of the matter. So on the one hand, I see people saying we've got to not be triggered, we've got to stay neutral. But actually, I think it's a combination of knowing ourselves well, so we know what it is of ourselves that has been triggered, but also if it's in service to our coachee, I think that's where we bring the potency of who we are as coaches to enable change to take place. So I think it's something we need to use in service of our coachees, is where I come from.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Richard, you raised your hand as well.
Yeah, I was just picking up on that biases, actually. I also train human factors, safety leadership, the human factors to cut down on accidents in culture. And it crosses over with my coaching, really. And we use this thing called situational awareness, which kind of is what Sue was talking about there, really, in many respects. And then this PUP, which is perception, understanding, and projection. And I always try and remind myself to perceive what the other person's saying or doing, or what biases they might seemingly be presenting. And then I seek to understand them by exploration. And so I separate the perception and the understanding before I start to project and move forward with more questions or discovery or even acknowledging that I feel there is a bias. But what happens in accident situations is when people merge the perception and understanding in one simple, in one thought process, and it never really works. So.
Thank you, Richard.
No, I was just thinking about something. Imagine we talk about coaching as partnering, being with the other person, being alongside of the other person, walking with the other person, looking for greatness. And I was just imagining, what if we were walking down a path in a forest with another person and we were just quiet. It's two of us. And the coach is always quiet, never saying anything, not enjoying the walk with the other person, not pointing out things that they notice, not being in the same path. It would be a boring walk. When we got to the end of the path, it probably would be a very different experience. We would see different things. It would be a different story. But if on that path, walking together, if we have moments where we experienced them together and saw things, both of us are curious, but we saw things maybe from different ways, but we were together on that walk, the stories at the end of the path would be more cohesive. So it's like, I love walking on the path and being present with another person instead of walking it alone. So that's sort of the thoughts I was having as you all were talking.
Thank you, Jennifer. Marco, you're up next.
Yeah, my perspective, observation is really important. It's really, really important. But in a way, bias still work everywhere and every moment. So I have a different attitude. When I am an observer, I have a direction to observe in some direction. So there is another attitude that's more complicated and more complex as a theory, the complexity theory, that is the witness. So it's a kind of curiosity that surprised me. Instead of the curiosity of the observer, can look to find some clue. In the other approach, the witness approach, I'm surprised myself from what emerged in this present moment that we create in this co-creation when I talk with someone that is different from me.
Thank you for that. An interesting way of looking at it, huh? From a couple of perspectives, in fact. Wonderful. Anybody else? I'm not seeing any hands raised. Did we have anything in the chat? Oh, we have Laura back again. So please, Laura. Mute. You're on mute, I think.
Everyone speaks of speaking of bias. Another thing has come up. How do you? How everyone says you have to be aware when the bias is there. But what came out of our conversation is okay. You can be aware of what came up in you, this bias, during the conversation, or reflecting after the conversation. And during the conversation, sometimes it's difficult to manage because you're listening to the other person, and either you don't notice that in that moment that you're biased, or you cannot sort of deal with two things at the same time. At least it's my experience. So in other words, we identified 3 moments. One moment in which you could experience bias, but you cannot deal with it during the conversation. Another moment in which you are after the conversation, you write your notes or you reflect or whatever it is. Then you can really think about it. What was it? But in which way I have not, or I judged or something. And the other thing that someone remarked was, well, you have to prepare also yourself before the conversation by being calm, by being grounded, by, I don't know, mindfulness, whatever it is that you do. So there are sort of 3 moments in which you can become aware that there is a bias. And I thought we found it interesting, these 3 different moments in which you deal in different ways with your bias.
So a preparation before the call, a recognition during, and a reflection after, to kind of see where to be prepared for being biased or triggered, dealing with it in the call, and then looking at how you could have maybe done it differently or what you
better, or where is it the bias, and later on.
So that's a few strategies for dealing with it. Great, thank you. Okay. We only have a few minutes left, in fact.
Yeah.
So do we have one last person, maybe?
Yeah, I'd also like to give Jennifer an opportunity to maybe wrap up or give us some last insights. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think you have a lot of wisdom to share.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I'm super happy that we came together in this moment, because it's something that we all as coaches have to contend with, if we're honest. One of the things I was taught, if we have a brain, we're all biased. And the values that we have carry us through life. These values that all of us share, they are a part of our human DNA, our fabric. They operate the way we think, the way we work, the way we connect, the connections. And if the truth be told, as a coach, that's what we're doing. We're getting at the core of what people value and how they show up. And so important to have a trusted partner like a coach who does not judge, you know, who really believes in that person, like the human being side. And so I was telling Rix and Mick, I think this is a conversation that we can have for the next year. With the society right now, everybody's going through the pandemic. That's been the last 2 years. And one of the things that I've seen on this global world stage is values being challenged, especially in HR, in coaching. You know, we hear things about vaccinated, unvaccinated, who gets in, who doesn't get in, who do we accept, who don't we accept? And you have leaders and you have people contending and really being pit up against their values. And it's real. So I think everybody right now needs a partner, a coach, someone they can trust to really help them sit there and think about Where do they want to stand in this? You know, what values do they really have? Somebody brought a great question up around, is the idea of values translated across cultures? And I think that's a very important question, because if we don't stand for something, all of us are going to fall. So that would be what I leave with. I would love to, I'm going to keep thinking about, how do I sit in this with my clients, sit and just listen and be a supporter of that person in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. Beautiful. So I guess this is what we leave you with, right? Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. It was wonderful to meet all of you, and it's great that we were with such a large community of intercultural coaches. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions or like to continue this conversation. Mick and I hopefully will be presenting in June with the European Mentoring Coaching Council. Let's see. And then we're going to explore, what other coaching theories are out there that are maybe less Western than we are used to, because lots of the coaching theories, concepts come from Western countries and cultures. So we hope to see you again, maybe in another masterclass, and we hope you enjoyed this conversation and you learned and it raised your awareness around intercultural coaching. You will get a small, short evaluation from the NOBCO or the EMCC, and please fill it out. That will be really helpful.